Welcome to Week 2 of the History and Systems of Psychology class. Here are our objectives, so please pause the video to review. Now today we'll discuss the early philosophical and biological foundations of psychology and look more closely at significant accomplishments along the way. We'll do this in two parts: early philosophical foundations and biological foundations. And as you view this video and read the text assignment for the week, think about the person or event that stands out for you the most. And why not test your knowledge up front with the following matching item? If you're not sure of the answer, hopefully you'll add to your knowledge about this and other concepts throughout the video in your reading. Let's begin with Part 1, Philosophical Foundations. First, it's best to establish a rough timeline of psychological history since the dawn of civilization. And here are the major epochs and events that we'll cover. To anchor our whirlwind tour of early philosophy, it's best to become familiar with three important ways of knowing and watch their historical development over time. The first is faith, which is divine revelation and dogma and forms the basis of religion, such as Judaism and Christianity. Next is rationality, or thinking and reflecting, and this forms the basis of philosophy, evident in Plato's writings. And finally, systematic observation, which is integral to science and specifically to Aristotle's work. Think about how each of these factors contributes to our work as therapists. Now, essentially, the dawn of civilization began with 4 distinct river valley societies, but I want to focus on the historical developments that occurred between the years 3000 and 301 BC. Let's begin with Chinese philosophy, specifically Confucianism and Taoism. And then we move to the 2 major Indian religions of this time, which were Hinduism, which emphasizes reincarnation, or the wheel of life, and Buddhism, the aim of which is to achieve a state of detachment called nirvana. Judaism was another prominent religion, and 3 essential components of the Jewish faith are love of learning, worship of God, and the necessity of doing good works. Think back of the 3 ways of knowing, and Judaism represents faith, which involves divine revelation and dogma, and forms the basis of religion. Now we turn to Greek philosophy, which provided an explanatory system of understanding the universe, the world, and human experience. Its first architect was Socrates, who urged each human being to know thyself so that society could advance to its highest level. Plato was a student of Socrates and believed that thinking, and not just observation, based on sensory data, gives us access to knowledge. When we revisit our 3 ways of knowing, Plato's contribution would be rationality, our ability to think and reflect, which forms the basis of philosophy. And finally, Aristotle was a student of Plato and believed in the power of observation, using 5 senses to construct and determine our experiences, which rounds out our 3rd way of knowing, systematic observation. Now we move to the time that spanned 300 BC to AD 701 and encompassed the Roman Empire and the advent of Christianity and Islam. Christianity, as outlined in the Bible, is derived from the work and teachings of Jesus Christ. It includes Catholic, Protestant, and Eastern Orthodox churches. Islam is defined as submission to the will of God. The Book of Islam is known as the Quran, which means recitation. Next, the Dark Ages, when there was little advancement of philosophical thought, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance. In the Middle Ages, St. Thomas Aquinas was known for the doctrine of double truths, which stated that something could be true in rational philosophy, but false in religious beliefs, because faith and reason are separate ways of knowing. Can you think of something that could be rationally true, but false from a religious perspective? Then came the Renaissance, which marked a new beginning or rebirth, as its name implies. It was a period in time marked by curiosity and a spirit of optimism, a transitional period of history from medieval to modern times. Important figures of the Renaissance include Martin Luther, who became the leader of Protestantism and was denied the authority of the Pope. Also important to the Renaissance was Machiavelli, who founded modern political science, which studies human behavior in terms of organization and utilizes objective methods rather than religious principles. Important scientists of the Renaissance included Copernicus, who argued that the earth revolved around the sun, and Galileo, who improved upon the telescope and saw more freely the movements of celestial bodies. Isaac Newton established the law of gravitation, and we'll talk more about these individuals and their accomplishments during class time. Ushering in the modern period was René Descartes. Descartes is known for the concept of mind-body dualism, in which the mind is completely different from the body, though one impacts the other. Now, before moving to the next section, let's test your knowledge with the following question. Now we move to part 2, in which we focus on biological foundations of psychology. Take a minute to review the timeline of characters and events we'll discuss. And because there is a large cast of characters in this section, I'm adding a human timeline for easy reference as we move forward. Thomas Hobbes begins our discussion. Hobbes believed the human mind is active, but with a limited capacity for free will. That's all I'll say about Hobbes for now, and the remainder of our discussion will focus primarily on spinal cord studies. Now, there are many complex systems in the human body, but one of the most important for psychology is the central nervous system, and as I just said, the spinal cord. Now, to learn more, we return to Descartes, who provided a foundation for studying the spinal cord by creating a hydraulic model of the brain that was ultimately proven inaccurate, yet pioneered the concept of automatic movement in the absence of will. Robert Witt studied the spinal reflexes in frogs, and in his work he distinguished between voluntary and involuntary actions. Charles Bell and Francois Magendie's work in spinal cord research concluded that sensory information is mediated by the ventral roots, while the dorsal roots carry neural information about movement. Their findings suggested that the brain was organized into regions that held specific purposes. Next, Johannes Müller developed the law of specific nerve energies, postulating that the nervous system and not physical stimuli determine sensory experiences. It's as if Müller was saying that our brains could exist perfectly without external stimuli, loosely supporting the brain in a jar theory. Then, Marie-Jean-Pierre Florent asserted that mental functions such as will, judgment, and perception were located in the brain, specifically the cerebrum. And finally, the speech guys were Pierre-Paul Broca and Carl Wernicke. Broca discovered that the speech center of the brain was located in the inferior gyrus of the frontal lobe, now known as Broca's area. Wernicke learned that the posterior third of the temporal gyrus was responsible for speech comprehension. This area is now known as Wernicke's area. Now, over time, it was discovered that the brain served as a mental map, kind of a well-formed guide of the relationship of each body part to other parts of the brain and body. Silas Weir Mitchell discovered incredible abilities of the brain, such as phantom limb, which emphasized psychic functions located in the brain And the curious case of Phineas Gage occurred in 1848 when Gage suffered a devastating injury that damaged his left prefrontal cortex. His personality changed radically and he became highly unpredictable and irritable. Then came the Golgi, Ramani-Cajal saga just after the turn of the 20th century, and each scientist held different views on neuron functions in the brain. Ramani-Cajal believed that neurons were indirectly linked through synaptic connections, and this is now accepted as a standard part of brain functioning. And the last decade of the 20th century witnessed so many extraordinary developments in our understanding of the nervous system, mind-brain relationships, and the evolution of consciousness that is often called the decade of the brain. During this time, a direct connection was made between emotional experiences and physiology, especially as mediated by the immune system. So many truly amazing accomplishments in such a short amount of time, and you'll need to wait for class time to learn more. Well, I hope this tour de force of the early philosophical and biological foundations of psychology has been helpful